Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. Gain valuable insights by attending the podcast, then complete the assessment test to download your certificate. To do this, follow these simple steps. Click on the link in your description to access the session. Create a free account and attend the podcast. After the podcast, take the assessment test and download your certificate. It's easy, and it's free. We highly recommend checking out our subscription.
Wow. In fact, you said something really phenomenal, that the delay in getting responses post your interviews has got nothing to do with you, but it has got something, it speaks a lot about the culture.
Yes.
It's,
Yeah.
I mean, you said it very flawlessly, but it has a lot of meaning in it that, it's just transformational. It's a transformational thought process. So
I consult with individuals on that, Saul, every day, all day, right? And from that side of the individual side of our business, I'm very transparent. I call it peeking behind the HR curtain. It is so necessary for people who are looking for opportunities right now to understand a high percentage. I mean, more than 50% of the time. I don't know what the actual number is, but it is more than 50%, which is a significant percentage, right? More than half of the time, someone who applies to something and either receives an automated response or no response, do you really want to work for an environment within a culture that doesn't respond, that ghosts, right? Think about what you're setting yourself up for as you're applying to positions. When they don't get back to you and they don't have any sort of policy or procedure around candidate referrals, around candidate applications within job, hunting and posting and all of that, if there's no real policy and procedure followed by everyone on the team, then yeah, I've got a problem with that. And you should know about it as well.
welcome everyone to another episode of your favorite podcast we're trying to figure out. I'm your host Saul, and today we are diving into a topic that every leader needs to hear: how healing, empathy, and purposeful hiring can transform your workplace. Joining me is Dana Neiger, the powerhouse behind Hive Talent Acquisition and the author of Before I Knew It, They Were Gone. Dana brings a human first lens to hiring, retention, and company culture. Dana, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Saul, thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone. Dana Neiger.
Absolutely. Well, Dana, your book isn't just a memoir. It's not just a memoir. It's a leadership guide disguised as a personal story. So how did your own healing journey inform the way you lead today?
Sure. And I really appreciate you saying it like that, because in writing the book, I certainly didn't see it as a leadership opportunity, right? So I really appreciate that perspective. My journey has been deeply intertwined with the understanding of the human side of leadership. Having worked closely with diverse engineering teams, Hive Talent Acquisition firm has a specialty, for example, in the transportation engineering industry. So we work very closely on a daily basis with small to medium-sized engineering firms that specialize in civil engineering, environmental engineering, geospatial, things along the lines of infrastructure from a roads, bridges, and highways and traffic perspective. And
Gotcha.
I've witnessed firsthand, Saul, how leaders who prioritize emotional intelligence and healing foster environments where individuals feel more valued beyond their
Yes.
technical skills. And this
Yes.
approach not only enhances team cohesion, but it also drives innovation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And was there did you experience this during your talent hiring process? That there's a lot more in the emotional intelligence that is not being taken care of by these firms.
Yes, absolutely. And it's not just these firms, right? I don't want to make it a specific, like, oh, transportation engineering is the only environment out there that isn't doing this well. That is absolutely not the case, right? There's always room for improvement in every single industry and arena. It's just the one we're going to be talking most about today because it's our specialty here at Hive. But I would say every industry, every arena, everywhere work environments bring different cultures together, different kinds of people, backgrounds, different ages, as far as generations working together. All of those opportunities for difference are also opportunities for fresh perspective, and to be able to understand how emotional intelligence plays into your daily awareness at work, in your personal life as well. That's a huge advantage to anyone.
Wow, that's incredibly powerful. I mean, I love how you frame that as a strength and not a weakness, right?
Yes,
Because
sir.
I mean, mental health is finally getting the spotlight in the workplace culture, you
Thank
know.
goodness.
But yeah, thank goodness. But still, there's still a lot. There's still a long learning curve because a lot of leaders are still learning to embrace that shift.
Yeah.
So, in your experience, can you give us an example where a leader did the inner work which led to better team outcomes?
Absolutely. I mean, mental health is foundational to a strong workplace culture. And so
Right.
when these small to medium sized firms bring Hive in as the HR director representative and or both the talent acquisition person or recruiting representative, right? It is
Right.
important to evaluate who you're working with, what skills they bring to the table, but then also to understand from a leadership perspective, new leaders need a different kind of leadership training than, let's say, experienced C-suite leaders, right? And bringing all of that together again from a mental health awareness perspective, isn't it easier for all of us to collaborate when we're being transparent, when we can have open communication, et cetera, which raises our EI, which raises our work perspective and awareness. So it all kind of comes together and plays really nicely into this umbrella called culture.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it's amazing how something so human can still feel a taboo at work, especially mental health awareness, because there are, a lot of people don't really talk about it at work because they still feel it's kind of like a taboo
Yeah,
at
well, I think
the
you really
workplace.
hit the nail on the head there too, Saul, with the perspective of bringing the human side back, and that mental health awareness within a workplace culture is so incredibly important for that specific task. Yeah,
Absolutely. And I guess, it all has to start from the hiring, right? Let's talk about the hiring part because we are seeing companies who are so much obsessed with the resumes, but they
absolutely.
they miss the person behind them. These are what are these are some outdated hiring practices. But
Mhm.
from your experience, having been at the front end of hiring for so many organizations, what are some of the outdated hiring practices that just need to go now?
Great question. Really great question. So traditional hiring practices that rely heavily on resumes often overlook potential of candidates with non-traditional backgrounds. And it's
Right.
crucial to assess a candidate's adaptability,
Hmm.
problem-solving skills, and cultural fit rather than solely focusing on their past job titles or, for example, gaps in work, right?
Right.
That is one of the most outdated ones that I can share. A gap in work that is actually a relevant answer, right? Even including someone who may or may not have been fired or let go or whatever the case. These are all legitimate reasons. And if someone actually has a professional answer and can wholeheartedly admit to you, yes, I was fired from this opportunity, and here's why. You've got to listen to that. There's a lot being shared there. And it goes without saying that the empathy, that the listening skills, it's not just listening to hear and waiting for your turn to speak, but it's active listening. It's
Yeah.
listening so that people on the other side of you feel heard. That is a part of this mental health awareness, right? That is super important. But it's also listening for things between the lines, reading between the lines is so important in understanding a candidate's motivations,
Right.
values, and how they align with the organization's culture. That deeper insight right there helps identify individuals who will thrive and contribute meaningfully to your establishment.
Perfect. Well, let's flip the table, right? One
Sure.
is the employer side of it, wherein they need to start overlooking these things. And then there is the employee side of it, the one who is applying for the job. And
Mhm.
when you come across a resume, I'm sure you would also have this conversation with the employee because you want to know, okay, tell me about your resume, why this happened, what happened, and all that. So do you also prep the employees with what could have been a better way to do it? Like, for example, a lot of people are not comfortable talking about why they took a sabbatical or why they got fired, or those kind of things. So maybe, they got laid off because of a budget cut or something like that.
Right. Right. We do actually. So we have an individual side to the business. So I wouldn't be doing that for my clients from the candidate perspective, because you obviously want them coming in and knee-jerk reaction. You want those very organic discussions to happen in an interview, right? But on the individual side of what we do, yes, I offer coaching and training and prep as far as interview preparation and how to best answer questions like that. And one of the things that's on like a top 3 to 5 list that people always struggle with. So please, for your viewers, do not fret, do not worry, do not concern yourselves with not necessarily knowing how to answer a question. There are plenty of coaches out there that can give you some really great advice. I also dare to say, please don't data paralyze yourself, if I said that word correctly or that phrase correctly. Please don't data paralyze yourself, I think is what I wanted to say, from the perspective of getting information from so many different places. You really need 1 to 3 HR/recruiting gurus in your camp, right? On your dream team, to kind of give you the best advice as far as people who are specific to an industry and or arena that you're interested in. And you don't need to take advice from everywhere. I use this all the time. And so if any of your listeners have ever heard me say this, they'll probably get a little giggle. I'm fine if you want to listen to your grandma's sister's, nephew's, cousin's, dog's, goldfish's best friend, right? If you have a relationship with that person and you trust them, great. I'm not here to argue with them. What I am here to do is to break down miscommunications and gimmicks that often come up from an HR and recruiting perspective with this individual type coaching and prep, and let people know there are a whole bunch of things out there that you don't even need to worry about. And most of the time, not receiving, for example, responses in interview processes has nothing to do with your performance. It's actually an attest to the culture or lack thereof within the industry or the arena or the specific position you're applying to within that company.
Wow. In fact, you said something really phenomenal, that the delay in getting responses post your interviews has got nothing to do with you, but it has got something, it speaks a lot about the culture.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you said it very flawlessly, but it has a lot of meaning in it that, it's just transformational. It's a transformational thought process. So
I consult with individuals on that, Saul, every day, all day, right? And from that side of the individual side of our business, I'm very transparent. I call it peeking behind the HR curtain. It is so necessary for people who are looking for opportunities right now to understand a high percentage. I mean, more than 50% of the time. I don't know what the actual number is, but it is more than 50%, which is a significant percentage, right? More than half of the time, someone who applies to something and either receives an automated response or no response, do you really want to work for an environment within a culture that doesn't respond, that ghosts, right? Think about what you're setting yourself up for as you're applying to positions. When they don't get back to you and they don't have any sort of policy or procedure around candidate referrals, around candidate applications within job, hunting and posting and all of that, if there's no real policy and procedure followed by everyone on the team, then yeah, I've got a problem with that. And you should know about it as well.
No, it's true. I will speak from my experience as well, because there was a time when I didn't really head it, but I was part of the HR department for a short duration. I was there from a process improvement standpoint, because I had a little bit. I've got a Six Sigma green belt, so I was told to be involved from a process improvement standpoint, and this was something that I felt was a deal breaker for a lot of people, because when somebody is applying to a job to you, that person is looking for a job, and you have put that job out there because you need somebody who can fill that requirement. The longer the requirement stays open, the more it is going to be also hitting your revenue somewhere, because somewhere or the other, whether it be a revenue generating role or a support staff back office role, but somewhere that person is going to be contributing to making sure things run smoother and you're able to get that business going as usual. So to be able to lack of proper decision making at that initial touch point level, like these are the resumes coming in, and let's sift through them. And if there are those that are not hitting to the requirements that we're looking for.
Mhm.
Maybe it could be because, you did not explain the job description well, because that's also there, right?
And
There's
God
a
forbid, right? Oh, an HR person and or recruiting person who puts a job description out there and they think so highly of it. It's so perfect. But Saul, I can't tell you how many times in the last 5 years I have seen job descriptions go out there that are asking for a specific software experience that's only been in the market for 2 years, and they're asking for 8 years of experience with it. I know we've all been there, and it makes me so frustrated for candidates applying to that role, because I'm like, that right there is such a red flag.
Do you want to earn CPE credit? Take this course of MyCPE ONE to earn free credit. Click the link in the description to get started.
Yep, it is. It is. I mean, like for those, I mean, I'm sure, like the candidates would look at it and they would be like, "Is this for real?"
Yes.
You know,
Yes, but then you're so
because
desperate sometimes, depending on what level and where you are in your search, right, in your job hunt, that you apply anyway. And then let's say they call, and let's say you're in an interview process, and let's say you ask a question, and then boom, you're not in it anymore. It's like, what just happened? It can be a very tumultuous, lonely environment, quite frankly.
it can be. It can be. So, I mean, like coming back to that experience that I was sharing, one thing that I changed was I said that, instead of having that auto email responses, like, okay, thank you for your application. We'll get back to you as soon as we've reviewed it. And then it just goes into that, that zone that this person is just waiting. You'd rather want to take a day, but whatever resumes are received today, you review them tomorrow and you get back to them. If they're not a good fit, you let them know why it's not a good fit, because and also give them a chance to explain, because there's a probability that the person who submitted the resume, they probably did not include that information in there, because a lot of people don't really go through that effort of probably modifying some things in their resume, because it's something that they could have done in the past, but they just thought it was not that much important, so they did not include it into the resume. And
Right.
then that's exactly what they were looking for. So to give them a chance that, this is what we're looking for, and we didn't find that in your resume, because you got to look beyond the resumes. You
That's
also got
right.
to read between the lines, like you rightly said. You got to see beyond the resume, to not just read it word to word, but to see, what does it really mean? What do you think he was really doing? Like if he was doing this, that would mean he had the qualities of problem solving,
Yes.
or working under pressure, high volume environment. Those are the qualities that
Yes.
if a person's been working in that kind of an environment, what that speaks about that person, and what is the emotional intelligence that this person brings on board.
Yes.
It's a long connection, but when you learn to read between those lines, you're able to actually evaluate. And honestly, that perspective, it actually changed a lot about the hiring process, because they had to actually reinvent the wheel. And we also went through the process of looking through all the resumes that were just rejected, for the sake of, we didn't see it on the resume, that's why we did not proceed with. And when
Right.
we went through all those applications, that's when we came to know, and we reached back to them and we spoke to those people. That's when a lot of them followed through, and they were like, "Oh, yes, I didn't know that was something that you're looking for. Of course I did that."
Mhm.
And when you talk to them, do you come to know that, oh, this is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said, and I'll piggyback on what you just said and add one more from the perspective of when we're talking about hiring specifically and the advertisements associated, you can tell a lot about the
Yeah.
way they're written and who they, what's the word I'm looking for here, Saul? Who they prioritize to, right?
Yes. Yes.
And that is very interesting. So reading between the lines as a candidate, completely different, not better, not worse, but a different perspective than reading between the lines as, let's say, somebody in that HR or recruiting team, right? Thinking of yourself from the hiring points perspective as this is the best job out there. I've given you this beautiful purple squirrel or unicorn style type job description where this person doesn't actually exist, but we're going to find someone close. It's kind of like that really gives you some insight there into the internal culture and what really matters to them, right? The
Absolutely.
reality
Absolutely.
is take that control back because there's so little control from the candidate side of an interview process, but that is somewhere where the candidate can actually have control and feel like they have a real say in the interview process.
Absolutely. But let's say everything follows through great. Now you've hired them, but then there is a greater challenge that how do you keep these people, right?
Mm.
What really is driving retention today beyond just money?
Oh, that's a really great question. That's really good because there's a ton of things. Hasn't been the main factor for most people in many industries for over a decade now, truly.
Yeah.
And it's because of the new generations coming into the workplace every couple of years, right? I say couple of years, you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
employees are actually more likely to stay when they feel valued,
Yes.
supported, and align with the organization's values itself. A culture that promotes work-life balance, as an example, continuous learning as another one, and or career development, right? A path, a clear trajectory that expresses you're not just a warm body filling a spot, but that we believe in you and we hope to see you do this, 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 and this over the next 3, 5, 10 years, right? Short term, long term. And there's also
Yes.
recognition that I really wanted to bring up that plays a pivotal role in retention. The reality of
Absolutely.
the human psyche and human nature and the psychology behind retention from the perspective of recognition of your employees is actually and should be one of your top priorities to understand those in the company already and new hires and what motivates them to keep doing well. And for a lot of people, it's how you share their accolades with the community, right? With the greater community of, let's say, transportation engineering here in Atlanta, Georgia, or wherever, right?
Yeah.
It's a big
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, it is a big one. And you mentioned about, couple of years, and when you talk about, the people that are coming into the industry today, everybody is talking about we are no longer in a generation where we're hiring baby boomers or Gen X or Gen Y, millennials. We are actually hiring Gen Zs and younger workers, and they have a different perspective to looking at how the job works. They're asking for more transparency, more fairness, more information as to where their career is headed, where do they see as a growth perspective, you know. So together with all these shifts that you said, you mentioned about recognition, which is often overlooked.
It is.
It's not just a message in a group chat saying that, hey, you did a good job or something like that. It
Yeah.
goes beyond that to let them know. So what's that? If I were to ask you, I know this is a larger question, but to ask you, what's that one thing that those small things that companies can do today to show appreciation and keep their people engaged?
Yeah. So lots of little small things that companies can do today that are super popular. Gift cards. Gift cards go such a long way. They're so easy. They're so wonderful. There are so many different as well conduits for getting your employees gift cards or even allowing them to choose once they earn one, like what they want. And I would highly look into that with all of your HR and or research teams because those conduits are fantastic, right? Gift cards go such a long way. Hey, you killed it in this presentation the other day. Here's a $25 gift card to Starbucks for someone you know who loves coffees and teas, right? Or
Yeah.
someone you know who's going through home projects, right? Home Depot, Lowe's, fantastic, and other local Ace Hardware, right? Those kinds of things. But then there's also a reality, and we won't get into politics and all of that, but there's a reality of what several administrations over my 45 years have done to our economy, which makes it very challenging for even seemingly successful people on the outside to be able to feed themselves, feed their families. There's a lot of insecurity as far as food and people receiving nutrients. And so from one of the perspectives, food, Uber Eats and all of those other types of situations and how you can order people opportunities or gift cards through those as well. Those are hugely advantageous to positive interactions at work.
Absolutely. Now, those are those tangible recognitions. And then we're also talking about emotional intelligence earlier in the conversation.
Yes.
And, there is this term that I came to know about when I was talking to another speaker called Jeff Smith. And he spoke about psychological safety.
Yeah. It's a great one.
It's a great one. No, when I heard it for the first time, I was like, "What psychological safety?" And it was only when he made it clear to me, because you don't quite realize it, but it's something. Nobody wants to be working in an environment in which we have got this thing that if I did not do this right, I could be losing this job. Like, to
Right.
not have that. I mean, he said a very strong thing, that an organization needs to have a culture of accepting mistakes, that it's a normal thing.
Yes. Yes.
Or or maybe just like, to request for something, like if you're struggling with getting your work done better, or to get your work done, to be able to have that opportunity to say that, hey, I need training on this, or probably I need these tools so that I
Mhm.
can do it better. Maybe it's something that nobody else is using, but it's something that just you need, because you found out that that's something that you think would be better. And also going a step further, to be able to have that environment wherein if you see something that is beneficial for the company,
Mhm.
like, you may not really have a bird's eye view if you're working in lower middle management or something like that, but if you think that it's beneficial for the company, to have that platform to be able to at least put that across, that, hey, like chat gpt, that's a talk of
Yeah.
the town today. Everybody knows what's chat,
AI, everything. Yeah.
generative AI and everything. But if they
Yeah.
find a tool that they think that, okay, I think we can use this in our business, because I see some business cases through which it can be helpful for the business to have that platform or that environment wherein they can actually demonstrate that, and the company to be able to be at the receiving end, to embrace that, learn from it, and acknowledge that in a right fashion.
Yeah. And I'll piggyback off what you said and expand a bit. So the role of company culture in retention, providing that positive company culture that embraces equity, inclusion, and diversity aspects, creating an environment where employees feel a sense of belonging, which
Yes.
significantly impacts their decisions to stay. That is tied into the retention, but I'm going to expand from the perspective of psychological safety, because you mentioned that earlier, and it is such a, that phrasing holds a special place in my heart for many different reasons. I've had so many stories over the last few months, and again, not trying to get into politics, but just expressing from the public sector and people calling, needing coaching, needing assistance and whatnot. When you hear people speak about psychological safety, it goes so much further than being able to ask questions and feel comfortable and being able to make mistakes at work and learn from them. It's also race aspects from the perspective of women of color and hair, right? Or tattoos, or any sort of physical features, right? That have been looked down upon in the past, and somewhere along the way, and I'm just going to say it, you can always cut it out, right?
Yeah.
Is that sort of old school corporate white mentality, right?
Yes.
And people have felt that their way was the right way for a very long time. But the reality is that is a very limited talent pool, right, for hiring purposes. And you have no fresh perspective. When everybody who makes decisions looks alike, that's a problem culturally.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.
So
Well,
I
and
just,
when we talk about all these things, and because it's a wave that's happening, we're hearing a phrase that has become common, which is also there probably in the job descriptions now, that we are a people first culture,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that is, a lot of people probably don't really have a real idea of what it really means. But for you, who has been in the industry for so long, if I were to ask you, people first culture, what does that really mean? And when do we know that it's really working well?
Yeah, that's great. So what it means is prioritizing the employee's well-being,
Okay.
fostering open communication, and
Mhm.
supporting continuous development, right, of
Yeah.
that individual or individuals, right? Such environments encourage collaboration and innovation. And the leadership style that that represents is so much more like trusting and inspiring, as opposed to the carrot on the stick, right?
Yeah.
I've got the carrot. If you follow, you can have the carrot. Do what I tell you, right? No, 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 no. I walk into a leadership meeting and I say, what are we talking about today? I don't lead the meeting. I'm not the one that has to be talking all the time, right? I
Yeah.
want my leadership to talk. I sit back, I listen, I observe, I take notes. When they come to me with what's important, I ask them why. Simple question. Why is this so important to you? Why does this matter right now? Right?
Yeah.
Characteristics of people first workplaces right there.
Yeah. And for some people it's natural. In fact, it's funny you mentioned this because I watched this series on Netflix, Zero Day. It's got Robert De Niro in it, and it's in the very first episode that he's head of his commission. He goes in and he's going to be meeting the team, and the moment he gets into the meeting, the very first question he asks is, "What do we know?" He's not coming in and saying that, all right, so we are here for this and this is what we're going to do. No. The first question he asks is, what do we know? Like letting the people who have been hired to have that say, what do you think? Or what are we talking about? Like you rightly said, that's the exact way to do it. But the problem is that, I think there's a problem of that mindset because, leadership is something that comes from the top, right? And there are leaders who are trying to move into it. They're trying to improve the culture by creating this people first culture, but they are still missing the mark, because they're making some mistakes along the way, because of which they're just trying to improve the culture, but they're still missing the mark. So what are some common mistakes that leaders are making when they're trying to improve this culture?
That's a good question. Organizations often make the mistake of implementing top-down change without involving the employees in the process, right?
Aha.
And that's that transparency that we were talking about earlier, because true cultural transformation requires collective input and commitment from everybody involved, right? So
Yes.
a top-down leadership doesn't work without making sure that what's coming down from the top is well received and or possibly changed, manipulated a little bit along the way to make sure that everybody is on board with it. And that's the most important part, right? When you don't have people on board, then you have a situation where you have a national or even international organization that has multiple offices and the offices aren't aligning, right?
Yeah.
Numbers are skewed and different between Atlanta and Charlotte and Los Angeles, right? And why? Because the culture in all four places are completely different based on what they think executive leadership wants to have happen. That is where training, and not just one training, but consistent training, like every year doing similar trainings that advance people with metrics. And I know people hate that, but it's not about metrics from the perspective of testing. It's about metrics from the perspective of making sure you're ready to move forward with your leadership.
Yeah. In fact, when we talk about matrices, I also, when I was studying for my Six Sigma, there was something called like capability maturity matrix. And, every organization goes through a growth process. There's a learning process, and then they lead to that point and it eventually leads to it. And there are 5 stages. And from the very first stage, how do you identify at what level of maturity are you as an organization? The very first level has got the top down approach, which is something that we see consistent in a lot of organizations today.
Yeah.
And the 5th stage, which is the most mature stage, has got the bottom up approach, wherein
Love that.
yeah. So it's like flipping the tables completely. Like you're not really talking about you know this is what I think we should be doing. But it's kind of like, they're listening to what the grassroots people, the people who are on the field, who are doing the
Yes.
work, they're taking
Yes.
feedback from them. And then they're taking that into their decision making and then making those decisions so that it becomes favorable for those people working, to give that favorable environment, to give whatever is required to get that job done better. Because eventually it's going to lead to the top, like whatever is getting done better, the revenue is coming in quicker, or the processes are better, the service is better, whatever business you're into, or the quality of the product gets better, or whatever that is, and then
Yeah.
it goes to the top. So that's it's a maturity level as well for an organization. When you put in this people first culture, you actually put it into place, you have got those matrices and you've got those mechanisms in place, you're able to also mature as an organization. It doesn't matter whether you are multi-city, multi-country, or you're just a small mom and pop shop. It's the values that define, what kind of way you're going.
Absolutely. You can even be a solopreneur. And if you don't give good customer service, right, you could be a solo CPA. And
Yeah.
if you don't give good customer service, your client base every year around tax season is going to dwindle, right? So
Yeah,
it matters all the way through. It doesn't matter your size. You're absolutely correct.
absolutely. In fact, the surprising thing is with AI coming into play, a lot of AI has now gone into decision making. I'm seeing products out there which are like, AI will kind of sift through the resumes, read between the lines to know what it actually means, match it with the job description, which is also prepared using generative AI to let you know which of these candidates fall better, and then to have a rating system, how much are they closer to the fit and all that. And we're seeing platforms that are actually able to provide that. You go onto LinkedIn and or maybe some platform and you're applying, it's also
Yes,
giving you rating, how much percent are you matching to the job and how many skills do you have and everything.
that's right.
And the problem with that is, if you remove human from a process which requires you to be dealing with humans,
Yes.
you are actually just not doing justice to the entire process,
Yes.
but I mean, there are pros and cons to everything, right?
There
you,
are. You're absolutely
you
right.
I
I will
mean,
share a personal perspective here really quick. Every quarter, I go through different kinds of interviews on purpose myself to
okay,
keep abreast of what the industry, the arena, whatever specialty I decide that day is pushing out, right? What
right,
do interviews look like these days? So there are all kinds of new kinds of interviews out there. And there are also a ton of scams out there, right? In these processes. And the latest scams happen to be, unfortunately, around recruiting. I'm sure everybody's heard all over the news some of the horrible things that have happened recently with Indeed interviews where these people have gone missing, shown up, on site supposedly for things and just have disappeared. And that is super scary. The other aspect is fraud associated with interview processes asking for personal information like credit cards and bank information.
whoa,
And one of those that people just need to know right now, if you're in an interview process and it's virtual and you're on a Teams with someone who looks human, but they're
yes,
asking for those numbers, you need to know. You must have some sort of gut check moment that tells you that this is a scam. No one
yeah,
should be asking for any of that information, digitally in an
yes,
interview process. None of that is necessary for an interview process. So I do these all the time, like I said, to make sure that I stay update and abreast of what's going on in our environments on purpose to help be able to coach better on my individual side. And I have to
well,
say, there are a ton of them these days that are terrifying.
I mean, like, a ton of them these days. In fact, I would say that, there was a time when I used to work for a staffing firm, and one of the banking clients had a process in the recruiting place, because they're going to be hiring for roles wherein they're going to be having exposure to a lot of customers' financial information, and they're going to be dealing
Right.
with a lot of financial data, to
Right.
actually have their personal information shared before even an interview, like with the resume, so, and a consent
Hmm.
uh, for having a credit check done on them.
Oh Lord. Yeah. I would have a huge red flag from a people and culture perspective if I was head of people and culture, for example, with that environment, because that will limit your talent pool to a completely unique type of talent that you probably don't even want for that position anyway, right? Someone who doesn't understand isn't necessarily a bad candidate, but someone who doesn't understand and follows through and doesn't realize it's a scam or could be a scam. Yes, I've got a problem with that hire.
Yeah, I mean, uh, as technology evolves, so do the scams. Back then, I remember there was a scam wherein there's a proxy, like, and this happened during the pandemic a lot, in fact,
Yes.
because everybody's interviewing virtually. So I am there for the job. It's my resume. I'm actually there on the job, and you're the manager, and you're actually asking me questions, and I'm actually giving you the answers. But the surprising thing is that he's got like you think that, he's listening to you from the earphones, but actually those earphones are connected to another guy who is listening into that interview, and he's giving them the answers in real time. And he's just, he's demonstrated that skill that he's able to listen as well as speak on it at the same time.
Wow.
And this happened during the pandemic a lot, especially with some technical interviews. Like they're like students or freshers, but they are actually cracking interviews for jobs that require 4 to 5 years of experience, because the person who is helping him is an experienced guy and he's helping them with the process. Right now, I don't know where that is because I'm out of that. But today as well, although, like everybody's now traveling for work and they're going to the
Sure.
office for interviews and everything, but still there are a lot of companies that still employ a virtual interview setting. I'm
Mhm.
not sure if that still exists, but that's one interesting scam that I had come across. And I was like, eventually that person has to do the work, right? I mean,
That's right. What is the
y-
point of lying up front about your transferable or non-transferable skills for that matter, right? When you're not going to be able to do the work anyway, and you're going to be looking for another job pretty soon after that. I mean, you can only fake it till you make it so far, right? And the reality is, utilizing AI, since we've been talking about it, to help you understand what your personal transferable skills are related to the jobs and the applications that you're doing. That's a great way to utilize AI to help prepare yourself, but don't cheat, right? Know that you can do the role because your transferable skills are there, but also understand there are certain skills that you need training and continued education on. And if you don't have them and their requirements, that's not going to work out. There are certain
yeah,
skills that can be fudged a little bit, right? But there are quite a few skills out there that cannot.
yeah. I mean, like we caught it. I mean, because we were at the recruiting end, so we found out. And I mean, it was so funny because I was just curious that, like, how does a guy make it at the job? I mean, like,
Doesn't last
he may be
long
able,
before.
and surprisingly, the person who helps him with the interview also coaches him and helps get his job done for the first 3 to 4 months. And I'm like, a lot of people are unemployed and they just want new ways to keep themselves employed or whatever that may be. Mm.
Wow.
It's crazy.
That's a new one.
It is a new one. It is a new one.
Yeah.
But transferability of skills, that's something that a lot of organizations are not looking at it properly.
You're
Or,
right.
they're not even able to identify that if is there a skill, like you see a resume and you're not able to identify that this person has a skill, although it was in a different industry, in a different job, but he has the skills that I need for this job that I can actually use.
Right.
They're
Right.
not able to see that. But in fact, they may not be able to know that this is a skill that can be transferable.
Right. That's right.
And some common transferable skills that probably you can just highlight on that. These are some skills that are actually transferable across jobs. If you can just highlight some.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a ton of them, and there's soft and hard skills that are
Yeah.
transferable, right? I mean, hard skills are less transferable because it depends on the job, right? So in transportation engineering on a daily basis, the reason why we work with civil engineers and environmental engineers at various levels of experience, but that PE, that professional engineering license, has to be involved because some of these engineers need to be able to stamp plans, need to be able to say approved by a professional engineer, right? You can't be a professional engineer without having a certain degree, which is in that civil engineering, environmental engineering, mechanical engineering. Any of the engineers can be a professional engineer, right? But you have to have then worked under a professional engineer for a minimum of 4 years to take the licensing tests. And
Yeah.
so all of these things are put into place to create a mode of success, right? Setting someone up for success is important. We don't want to set people up to fail. That's just ridiculous and a waste of everybody's time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you talked about soft skills as well. Like these are hard
Yes.
skills, which are definitely not. And some
Right.
transferable
Right.
soft skills.
Exactly. So soft skills wise, the things that always transfer and you should make a big deal out of when you're interviewing are if you have soft skills along the lines of lifelong learning, continued educator, right? Someone who's always willing to take that next training or course or get that license or get those certifications. to keep abreast and above and beyond the knowledge that is necessary for the role that they do. That's key. Certifications, I just want to point out to your listeners and viewers, certifications are so important to look at from a completely different perspective than you may have been looking at them from. Certifications require you, in order to keep that certification relevant, right, within what you do, they require continued education, which means you are staying up by choice, up on the changes and additions to whatever it is that you study, right, and do on a daily basis. That is why certifications hold a really high transferable skill with me personally when I'm reading through things, right? Lifelong learning, as I said as well. And then a few others, problem solving, project management. It's not that I think that everyone from every single industry can be successful in every industry as a project manager. But if you have someone who has been successful in even one industry for 10 plus years as a, let's say, project manager with project management experience, and you know you've got your Six Sigma, right, and all of that, you've gone through all of these trainings, all of these courses, you're keeping your certifications relevant, right? Yes, this is someone who likely would be successful in just about any industry or arena. And I dare say human resources is also, those kinds of things are transferable from the perspective of, right, the people management and the employee relations side of things. You can do that in any industry if you've had experience with it in at least one for 10 years.
Are you seeing anything significant? Because right now we're seeing that the industry is having a talent shortage, which is very surprising because there are more jobs than the people who are hiring for them. Why is it still saying it's a talent shortage? Why is that?
Yeah, we do go through ebbs and flows in talent. That is so true. And the ebb, if you will, from the talent perspective that we're in right now, the fact that there are more jobs appearing wise than people or bodies to fill those spots is because people are terrified. I'm just going to be very honest. I'm not going to say, you know, like from a political perspective, I'm just going to say the next 4 years have set up some real concerns for people who don't necessarily want to make moves right now. Usually the way the cycle works is first quarter extended. That's when hundreds of thousands of jobs are available all over the world in all different industries and arenas, right? All different levels of experience. And generally speaking, from first quarter, right? January, February, March through April. So first quarter extended is generally the time. This year, however, there are so many jobs and so few candidates. This is the longest expansion of first quarter I've ever seen. It's going through May. There are hundreds of thousands of jobs and opportunities out there right now. But like you said, the reason why it's a quiet talent market is because people just do not want to make moves right now. They don't feel comfortable. If anything, what the recent public, sorry, lost my train of thought. I apologize, Saul.
No problem.
Public sector. And if anything, what the recent changes to the public sector have taught us in any industry or arena is if you're satisfied where you are, stay put for a while because you might lose your job where you are, or you might make a move and lose that job real quickly, right? Last in, first out kind of situation. And so people are sticking with stability because it makes them feel safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Dana, I mean, there's so much that I want to talk to you about, but I, I'm going to be asking you a question, just to put you on the spot. I kind of like have a rapid fire at the end of each podcast to just ask you a question, and whatever comes to your mind, you can just like, boom. All right.
Okay.
So first question, one book, or if you, I mean, like one book that you would recommend about leadership.
Yes, one of my favorite leadership books right now is Stephen Covey, Trust and Inspire. And there are a couple within that. I don't know if it's a series, but he's written several leadership books. Maybe start with Trust and Inspire and go from there.
Okay, and for today's current environment, the way you're seeing the companies are, if you could wave a magic wand and implement one policy at every company, what would it be?
It would be an all-encompassing wellness policy. I love that question, Saul. And the reason why it would be an all-encompassing wellness policy is it doesn't matter what size you are. If you can put some money away yearly for your employees, let's just start with, a 60-person company, right? That has $500 a year set aside in wellness for their employees to utilize as they see fit. And the parameters around it are, of course, you have to show receipts and make sure that you're doing it. So it's not just free money. However, you expand what it can represent. It's not just wellness from the perspective of a gym membership, right? It's gym memberships. It's any sort of subscription or opportunity, whether it's for cycling or yoga or Pilates, or whether it's for gym equipment in your home gym, right? Or for massage or for therapy, but it all comes together in one, and you get whatever that amount is. I love saying start with 500, but somewhere between 500 and 1500. It's like the most amazing gift you could ever give your employees.
Well, abracadabra to that, right?
Abracadabra to that. I love it. Let's get that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, this was a blast. I mean, like, this is great. Before I let you go, I would definitely want to, I mean, for our listeners, where can people learn more about your book and Hive Talent?
That's so kind of you. Yeah. So my book is actually available on Amazon. So you can actually find it. Before I knew it, they were gone, by Dana Neiger. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I am Dana Neiger on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only one, and it would be a pleasure to connect with all of you.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, Dana, thank you so much for sharing your insights. This is very timely and very critical. I pray that the pearls of wisdoms that we have shared in this podcast are helpful for all our listeners. So thank you once again. And to all our listeners who are tuning into the podcast, continue to tune in next week for another exciting episode that we're trying to figure out. Until then, take care. And as always, keep innovating in everything that you do. Cheers.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now